the one thing that I feel like all Iranians inside and outside of Iran want to know is that when does this lead to us being able to go on the streets and face the all these proxies that they brought into the country with guns and be able to revolt and finally finish the job? When is that signal going to be given to the people that they've been promising us since day one from all three, Reza Pahlavi, Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu? They all promised that when the time is right, we'll let you know when you'll come out. And they've been real silent on this, right? So it's been for a while now. I feel like the regime at this point, it's like in survival mode. It's like, okay, I will promise anything I have to promise as long as I stay in power, as long as I can hold on to power. And that is bad for the Iranian people because at the end of the day, they can make all these promises. They can let the uranium out of the country. They can do whatever they want to, they could literally kiss Trump's hand at this point. But at the end of the day, they still hold on to power. It's about survival. They're like the one fear that they have is the Iranian people because they know they will overthrow. They are not Trump is not there to overthrow. Now, this is my understanding, and this is the understanding Morad Vaizi had last night. I don't know if you watched his live stream on this, but that's pretty much at the end of the day. It's like the Iranian people want to know. They look at all these news and they want to see how it relates to the revolution, Sarnaguni. If you can explain that, that'd be great.
So here's, I'm gonna give you the bad news and then the good news. Okay, the bad news is that, and this is worse than the bad news because it's basically a meh. So the bad news is that nobody can give you a timeline, and if anybody does give you a timeline, don't take them very seriously, unless there are people with really like higher ups with like access to information that the rest of us don't. Okay, but basically the when is completely unknown. So the Iranian people need to be ready for this fight to take 5 days or 5 years or even more. They have to be ready regardless. And I know this has always been the case. I've been through this for so many times where some Iranians told me, like, Armin, we're 2 weeks away from regime collapse. And I told them, don't say that. We don't know. If you say that and if it doesn't happen, then you're going to cause people to not fight anymore. It happened in 98, like in Persian calendar, right? 96, 98, and the Master Revolution, and then now here as well. Every single time I was called maybe a regime supporter for saying that don't be so sure regarding all of this being done in a matter of weeks, right? I told them, like, be ready for a longer fight. And every time, unfortunately, I ended up being correct. And this time is the same. You have to be ready to for a much longer fight. Again, I'm not saying it's going to take longer. The regime might fall tomorrow. The regime might fall tomorrow. Like in the same way, like when Assad fell, like just a few days before it, nobody expected that Assad is about to fall, and then it fell, right? So when the regime falls, it could be the most unexpected time ever. It could be tomorrow. It could be 5 years from now. It could be longer, and we have to fight this fight as if it could be any of those things, right? So that's the bad news. But the good news, in my opinion, at least, is that even if there's a deal, it's not sustainable. Like, let's say the Islamic Republic gives everything that President Trump wants, and President Trump is satisfied. And the IRGC manages to, they give up the uranium, they give up enriching, they give up their missiles, they say, fuck it, fuck Mahdi, fuck Islam. They won't say it publicly, but they were like, fuck this ideological bullshit is costing us. Let's just stay in power. So many of our competitors have already been killed. That means that if we get to survive this, we're going to become richer than God with all of this oil and gas money and a monopoly over so many industries in Iran. Let's just give President Trump everything. Forget about destroying Israel. Forget about destroying the imperialist West. Let's just maintain our cruelty and suppression on the Iranian people. And that is enough, because then we have so much money that we don't have to share with all of the people that the Israelis and Americans already killed. And we will stay alive. We'll be in power. We will be rich. And with that money, we would be able to continue suppressing the Iranian people. And President Trump is happy because they gave up all the uranium, they gave up all the ability for them to enrich uranium in the future. So no nuclear, no long range missiles. And the IRGC is like, at least I lived and now I'm rich. And, forget the Palestinian cause. I'm in power, right? And so that sounds really bad. The thing is, that's not sustainable because it's true that the remaining parts of IRGC will become even richer than they used to before because they didn't even see that this could be a dream come true for them because these are like the third layer of IRGC leadership. So they couldn't see even in their wildest dreams for the first layer to be wiped out and the second layer to be wiped out. And now it's just them and all of this oil and gas revenue. It's true that the economy has been hit and there's a lot of damage to the revenue generating ability of the Islamic Republic because of all the war that we went through. However, there's so many less people to share it with that on a on a net basis, like you end up coming winning. Like you're much richer. Like there's less to go around, but there's also less to share it with. So that might be an ideal situation for them. However, the reason why it's unsustainable is even though now you're very rich and powerful, the economy is shit. The IRGC is rich, but the people are poorer. And it's not just now the anti regime people who are going to be more revolutionary because they're getting poorer and poorer every day. And we're like, the economic collapse is still underway. Like, we have, like, we're still haven't seen the worst of it. But it's also now it's not just the anti-regime people that are not going to tolerate that, especially after what they experienced in early January and the massacre that experienced. The pro-regime people are not going to tolerate that either, because the pro-regime people used to tolerate a lot of hardship for the sake of Islam, for the sake of Ali Khamenei, for the sake of Mahdi, for the sake of the revolution, for the sake of Palestine, for the sake of the axis of resistance. But once you betray all of those ideals, like they're going to be like, well, fuck, my fridge is empty, and we're not fine. And Palestine and Hezbollah has been thrown under the bus as well. Like I'm not gonna tolerate all of this hardship for a regime that is not even Islamic anymore in their opinion, right? So it's really like it's just so unsustainable for this to continue forever. Like no tyrant, like tyrants could continue to stay in power with minimum support, but tyrants cannot continue to stay in power with no support, with close to 0% support. Like all of this means that going against the philosophy of the Islamic Republic means that you're going to lose the regime supporters as well. And it's just really hard to imagine how the Islamic Republic is going to be able to survive that for long. Does that make sense, Farhad?
Yeah, it does. But again, because Trump promised, because Netanyahu promised, because Pahlavi promised, do you even think that's still on the agenda for them? Like, or was that like an earlier calculation that they had at the very beginning because they thought, okay, after they kill Khamenei, they probably thought it was like the Venezuela model. You get rid of one head of the dictator because they thought they were all just corrupt. They didn't really realize how deep this Shia ideology is rooted in this Islamic regime. Do you think that's still on their minds? Like they still think at the end
So,
of the day they have to give the signal? Or do they think, "Okay,
so,
it's screwed," or whatever? Like, yeah.
so let's look at the Americans, the Israelis, and Pahlavi, right? So the Americans and the Israelis already fulfilled their promise. What did they say? What did they promise? The Americans and Israelis never promised an uprising because the uprising is up to the Iranian people. The Americans and Israelis promised that help is on the way, and help did arrive. So what they promised is already fulfilled. They killed Khamenei. They destroyed so many IRGC and Basiji bases. They killed so many of our oppressors. They killed so many of the regime leaders. Like if like what else does help look like? That was the help. They actually did so much more than any of us could even anticipate. They did so much more than what we even could imagine. So the help arrived, right? So the fact that the regime didn't fall yet. Okay, so the Iranian people shouldn't keep looking at what the Americans and Israelis are doing. The Iranian people, like, they are responsible for most of the work. Like, we are supposed to do the job, right? So, and again, Princess of Pahlavi promised that the Iranian people will rise again, and yes, they will rise again. They never gave us the timeline. They didn't tell us when. But like, I've already gone through this so many times, like, before. After 96, people told us that the Iranian people will not rise again. As I told everybody they will, and they did. After 98, again, guys, these are years based on the Persian calendar. After 98, they told us that that was it. They were not going to rise again. I told everybody they're going to rise again, and they rose again. After the Master Revolution, the people were like, "That's it. They're not going to rise again." And I told everybody, "Don't bet against the Iranian people. They will rise again." And every time they rose again, bigger than last time, right? And then in the early after now the Lion and Sun Revolution, we got the biggest massacre in our history, in our modern history. And now so many people think like, okay, but that experience, they will never rise again. And I'm going to tell you, they will rise again. Okay, we don't know when, but we know that they will rise again. And when Princess of Pahlavi gives the call to action, the way it usually works is that he doesn't just give the call to action when nothing is happening. Usually there's an original momentum, and Princess of Pahlavi looks at that momentum and sees if it's big enough, and then he uses the call to action to be a catalyst and give moment and basically make the momentum exponentially bigger and make it spread everywhere, right? So this is basically a two-way communication. It's not that Princess of Pahlavi gives the order to the Iranian people, and it's not Princess of Pahlavi only. It's not the Iranian people deciding when the big revolution happens, and just Princess of Pahlavi just says, "Oh, I guess that's happening." It's usually basically it's a two-way thing. The Princess of Pahlavi takes advantage of the wisdom of the crowd to see when the situation is based on what the Iranian people on the ground are deciding. They decide better than anyone else when it's the time to go. And when he sees that is happening, then he gives the call to action. So it's up to the Iranian people, and the Iranian people know better than, like, nobody has the individual correct the correct information individually for when it's the right thing, the right time to do it. Usually when it comes to the wisdom of the crowd, there's an emergent property of the wisdom of a crowd, that it acts wiser more than the collective wisdom of all the individuals combined together. Usually you have this emergent property that it works, it collects data and reacts in a way that is wiser than anybody could understand, right? So nobody could know when that exactly will happen. You just have to, the Iranian people doing trial and error. When the time is right, you will see the uprising, and Princess of Pahlavi will then give the call to action, and it will take over. And here's the thing, you have to be ready for this. Maybe the next uprising might not be the one that brings the Islamic Republic down. It might not be. We will see more uprisings, and maybe it's not going to be the next one or the one after that or even the one after that. We might have to go through couple of more uprisings for the regime to fall. We don't know. The only thing we know is that we're swinging at this tree, and we have no idea when which swing is going to bring this tree down. But we know that if we keep swinging, the tree will come down. That's the only thing we know.
Thank you so much, Armin. But one more thing I want to just clarify. You said that Pahlavi will give the call to action once he sees the momentum like he did back in January and December, but he made it real clear that he will give like the conditions have to be set for the people to go out, because with all these like proxy forces with dishkas and technicals and like just parading with arms on the streets, they're gonna do another massacre. Maybe it might be even more, like even crazier. You'll see even hundred. I don't want to see that happen, right? So, like, I feel like people are waiting for this signal, right? So it's not like they're gonna do it without the signal. Then Pahlavi gives the signal, right? If you get what I'm trying to say. So
So yeah. Yeah, so here's the thing. Princess of Pahlavi gave some smaller call to actions as a way to test the suppressing ability of the Islamic Republic, and that was before the mercenaries were in. So to me, so you might say like people wait for the signal because there's so many mercenaries there, but we've already seen some people actually using guns now to respond to the Islamic Republic, and they're shooting. There's car explosions happening. There's some people who are being gunned down by the by the Gardajavidan people, the anti-regime Iranian people. So you might end up seeing, and the next uprising of the Iranian people to be semi-armed. You might see that happening, right? But but you're saying there needs to be, like I said, there needs to be a momentum, but other than a momentum, there needs to be some data coming from the ground, because there's, when you're saying like the CENTCOM and President Trump and Netanyahu and Princess Pahlavi, they need to realize when the conditions are right, but the
Exactly.
conditions being right cannot be determined until you're stress testing the Islamic Republic. Like you can't just observe, like, oh, I guess this base is destroyed. I guess there's no checkpoint right there. So we're going to determine the conditions are right. You can't decide that from top down. There needs to be some information being fed to you from the ground for you to know when the conditions are right. So stress testing the Islamic Republic and observing their suppressing ability on a limited basis here and there is important information for all of these groups that you mentioned, for them to be able to know whether the time is right.
Perfect. And do you
Yeah.
also think that Israel will be there to help the people as they revolt, like
Yeah.
through the use of drones, or let's say, there's some big base or there's a huge group of these terrorist forces with dishkas again, technicals. These can only be taken out with drones, right? So it's not like small arms fire or guerrilla warfare tactics can't really work on these people, on these like forces. So do you think that like it's going to be a tandem, or they're just going to say, well, we did our part, now it's up to you. We can't really help you anymore.
So that might be what happens, okay? But so here's what usually happens with the Israelis, right? With the Israelis, many times the Iranian people are hoping they do something, and sometimes they do exactly what the Iranian people were hoping the Israelis do, and many times help arrives in a completely different way. And usually, what the Israelis did, I mean, almost all the time, it was the better way, right? So sometimes the Iranian people have their own wish list, and they get disappointed for why the Israelis are not doing that, but the Israelis are doing something else, and it usually is almost always the better thing to do, right? Because they have better information for what they need to do. But here's, so I don't know how they're going to continue attacking the Islamic Republic. I have no idea how they're going to do that, but I know they will continue attacking the Islamic Republic. There are two groups of people who are not going to give up fighting the Islamic Republic. One is the Iranian people, and the other one is the Israeli people. So if you're wondering how they're going to do it, we don't know. But if you're wondering if they're going to continue attacking the Islamic Republic until the Islamic Republic is gone, the answer is yes. The Israelis are not going to give up on the Islamic Republic, on fighting the Islamic Republic until there is no Islamic Republic.
Thank you so much, Armin.
Next to respond is Jeffrey.
Hey, Susie's here.
Going to touch on a lot of the good points that were made and the frustration that's understandably being voiced. So anybody can give assessments. I'm one of those people. That said, the environment is fluid, never changing, and assessments do not stand. Like an assessment at one point in time doesn't sit there and just maintain that assessment. You can still have the same goal. It means you have to be operationally flexible and move and flow in response to a changing and fluid environment. I think that's what Armin is referencing. That's why His Highness Prince Reza Pahlavi is very, he's moving and flowing with what's going on. Nobody, not even AI can manage all the variables. You have to have some level of flexibility, right? Now, that being stated, I get the idea, the frustration, right? So whereas things sit on the ground, at least what I'm kind of seeing, there is growing internal pressure, is what you're seeing right now. You see small scale hits on IRGC and besieged members, localized unrest, and quiet defiance. There's no large scale sustainable nationwide uprising because we don't want to sit there and have the Iranian people take on undue risk, right? And I know that's frustrating to hear. The frustration is like diaspora protests abroad are loud and ongoing. In rallies in Europe and U.S. and Canada calling for immediate regime change and support for the people inside. And many feel it's not translating fast enough into coordinated action or stronger external or internal backing for internal revolt. So what do? The goal needs to be similar to the strategy outlined for Ukrainian defense forces. On top of the efforts, the political efforts and mobilization efforts, the best thing to do, and these are things being done, is to mobilize the anti-mullah in diaspora outside of Iran, where they can then set up self-sustaining nodes that can then provide non-lesser and legally provide non-lesser and kinetic support to anti-mullah remnant or elements throughout the anti-mullah diaspora, particularly inside Iran. So I understand and appreciate your frustration, even though I don't personally feel it in the way an Iranian would feel, right? I mean, I would never be so arrogant to presume that. I'm saying from an intellectual perspective, I can definitely understand the frustration. I think the point that Armin's making is ultimately you have to maintain a level of flexible patience and or operational flexibility.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.